Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about the update to the Derek Chauvin case that I was not expecting, because it turns out a judge, a federal judge, has actually granted a motion from Chauvin to re-examine parts of George Floyd's body, certain samples that were preserved from his Minnesota state trial case, in order to make the case that he had ineffective counsel and possibly lead to him getting his federal conviction at least overturned, although this may have some implications for his state conviction. Now, we're going to talk about this, we're going to break this down, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
So it's hard to imagine that anybody is unaware of the George Floyd incident, but essentially this is what went down. In late May of 2020, Officer Derek Chauvin was filmed holding down George Floyd during the course of an arrest in which George Floyd ended up paying with a fraudulent $20 bill at a convenience store. Floyd was clearly and obviously panicked, and from the public vantage point, at least from the cell phone video, it looked like the life was being choked out of him via the knee on George Floyd's neck. Now, of course, this caused an explosion in rioting, a resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, and after $2 billion in damages, after major changes, not just culturally, but in a bunch of our laws, Derek Chauvin was ultimately convicted in a Minnesota court for the murder of George Floyd. He was actually convicted on all counts, but in addition to that, he also faced federal civil rights charges. Now, in the state trial, Chauvin was actually given 22 and a half years for his sentence on the murder charges, and then he was given a 21-year federal sentence for the civil rights violation that is being served right now concurrent to that murder sentence. So it's not like he has to do 21 years federally and then 22 years in the state level, if you guys are confused about that. Now, we talked about on this channel, once we had the text of the body cam footage, that there were some questions related to cause of death for George Floyd, and part of the reason why I was questioning it is because according to the transcript of the body cam and then the body cam that we ultimately ended up seeing, George Floyd actually began complaining about breathing problems prior to him being on the ground, let alone Derek Chauvin's knee being placed on his neck area. So, of course, we end up looking at the autopsy. The autopsy shows that George Floyd had a fatal level of fentanyl in his system. We ended up finding out at trial that he spit up a fentanyl pill, or a pill that was laced with fentanyl, in the backseat of the squad car that he was moved through. And in addition to that, he also, according to the autopsy that was done by the state, had no signs of life-threatening injuries on his neck. So I thought at the time that there could be an argument for reasonable doubt in terms of cause of death for George Floyd in that case, and thus Derek Chauvin could be found not guilty if he had a trial that was fair and reasonable. Now, of course, we know that a Black Lives Matter activist who is wearing an I Can't Breathe shirt was actually on the jury that decided the fate of Derek Chauvin. We understand that there was a lot of pressure because Minneapolis had essentially been destroyed by the Black Lives Matter riots in order to find him guilty, so the fix was probably in no matter what, but these were the arguments that were brought up at trial that ultimately ended up not working at trial, and Derek Chauvin was convicted. But that's not exactly what this case is about. So in order to have a conviction overturned in the United States of America, you need to typically have one of two things. The first is a constitutional rights violation. Somewhere throughout the course of your trial, your rights were violated, evidence was withheld from you by the prosecution, something of the sort that ultimately ended up leading to your trial not going fairly, and of course didn't give you a fair chance. Now, the second thing that you would need is new evidence that was not available at the time of the trial that possibly could have changed the outcome of the trial, and this is actually a higher burden to bear than the constitutional violation. This is one of the reasons why Derek Chauvin is going with the ineffective assistance of counsel as the constitutional violation to which they are getting the chance to re-examine some of the aspects of the case, because essentially what Chauvin is arguing is that a doctor actually sent a theory over to his attorneys, and this was in the midst of the trial that he was already having in the state of Minnesota, and this was not disclosed to him by his attorney prior to his federal case, because again, this appeal is related to the federal case, which occurred significantly afterwards. And according to this information, there is an alternative theory of a cause of death for George Floyd that we should go over. So Chauvin was arguing that he would not have pleaded guilty in the federal case had he been aware of pathologist Dr. William Scheitzel's belief that he did not cause Floyd's death. He said that Eric Nelson, his original defense attorney, did not inform him about an email from Scheitzel where he said he did not believe Chauvin caused Floyd's death. Nelson failed to seek testing of the heart tissue samples that Scheitzel believed would show evidence of a heart condition called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, according to Chauvin. Quote, given the significant nature of the criminal case that Mr. Chauvin was convicted of, and given the discovery that Mr. Chauvin seeks could support Dr. Scheitzel's opinion of how Mr. Floyd died, the court finds that there is good cause to allow Mr. Chauvin to take the discovery that he seeks, Magnusson said in Monday's order. Now look, I've seen a lot of people excited about this. I've seen a lot of people upset about this, including the Biden administration, who condemned the judge allowing this to go forward. But you guys need to understand, and if you follow any of my talks related to innocence fraud cases, that ineffective assistance of counsel is one of the go-to moves for somebody who was convicted of a crime in order to try to get a means to get a new trial or to overturning their convictions. So this is anything but a guarantee of a positive result for Derek Chauvin, since this is such a common practice. But essentially, what this doctor ended up emailing to the attorney during the Minnesota state trial was this theory that George Floyd had a granuloma in and around the groin area, and a granuloma essentially spits out adrenaline or something like that, and that actually was activated during this stressful situation, and that's why George Floyd was so panicked in combination with the drugs in his system, and essentially it overloaded his heart and ended up resulting in his death. It is quite a novel theory for cause of death, and the idea is that if this was presented to Derek Chauvin, he wouldn't have pled guilty, and he would have used this as a defense in his federal case, and therefore he should not be held to that federal conviction. And then of course they're going to begin the process, if this actually holds, of trying to work back and getting rid of that state level conviction. But to be clear, they already presented a similar alternate cause of death at trial in the state trial, and that did not work as a defense. So I don't know how effective this is actually going to be, because at that point in time, you could have shown anything, clear and obvious evidence of an alternative cause of death from the prosecution, and that jury likely would have convicted based on all the circumstances surrounding the trial. I think the most ineffective assistance of counsel that could have been possible in that original trial was the fact that they didn't request a change in venue, because obviously the people of Minneapolis had suffered through a year's worth of Black Lives Matter rioting. There was so much political pressure on this case, and the idea that you could find 12 people that were unaware of it at the time of the trial was insane. Now, this Newsweek article actually has a breakdown of Chauvin's time in custody, and there's in fact references to a story that we didn't cover on this channel on its own in isolation, and this of course is in reference to the Black Friday stabbing of Derek Chauvin in an Arizona prison by another inmate who said that he wanted to do something in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, therefore he chose Black Friday. Now of course there's a comedic element to that, because Black Friday is known, or at least used to be known, for people storming into the stores in order to desperately grab items, and the George Floyd death is marked by crazy looting across this country, where they would do something that looks similar, except they wouldn't pay for those items. But setting that aside, obviously this man has not been taken care of in our prison system, despite the fact that he is an incredibly high-profile target. And Minnesota, the state prison that he was in prior to his federal conviction, recognized the unique threat that Chauvin had, so they actually had to keep him in isolation for 23 hours, allowing him only an hour to exercise in their only maximum security facility before eventually turning him over to the Fed. Now, if you're wondering why Derek Chauvin is going for the ineffective assistance of counsel, besides all the other reasons that I laid out for you, it is very important for you to understand that as a part of his federal plea deal, the only thing that he could appeal based off of, since he waived his other appellate rights, is ineffective assistance of counsel. So if he doesn't make it past this hurdle, there is nothing more for him to do in terms of this federal case, even if by some miracle he ends up finding the evidence that he needs and overturning his state level conviction. If they decide that his counsel was not ineffective in terms of his federal conviction, he will remain in federal prison throughout the course of his life. And obviously, President Biden nor President Trump is going to commute or pardon this guy for any reason at all whatsoever. It's too much of a hot button issue. But yeah, this is where we're at in terms of the Chauvin case. This is his last chance in terms of the federal case. And obviously, you guys can formulate your own opinions based on this new theory, but I'm going to advise caution if you think he's going to get out on this, because it is incredibly hard to overturn a conviction. And in addition to that, this is a very niche thing that they will likely say has nothing to do or would not have changed what the jury would have done at trial at the state level, because again, this is very similar to the diagnosis, although it has one additional element that was presented at trial. Now, of course, I will leave this up to you guys out there in the audience. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Derek Chauvin's last-ditch effort for appeal. Till next time.